Good afternoon, welcome back to the workbench. I have here a couple of buttons from a computer case, a power switch and a reset switch. It says so on here somewhere, if I can get the things shown there. There you go, power switch, reset switch. These are faulty. You can see with this one the wire has fallen off, and if you look really closely you can see that these things are rusty. You can see all this rusty crustiness around the terminals there. Yeah, that's the one that's still attached, and on the other one it's the same thing. You can see where one is broken off. This one doesn't look as bad, but it's still snapped. I mean, it is bad. You can see on the side there how corroded everything is. So yeah, you can see that the contacts on these switches are all sort of corroded. The wires have come off, or at least on one of them. And yeah, I think even when I press the button, at least, yeah, this one, whoops, this one feels really stiff and crunchy. So I'd say the contacts inside are probably rusted and corroded as well. So both of these switches are probably no good. I mean, yeah, maybe you could open them and clean them up and stuff like that. If the pin hadn't broken off, it might be fixable and cleanable or something, but as it is, I don't think they're worth bothering with, not when you can buy them so cheap. Here's some spare ones I have. Yeah, so I'm just going to replace these both with some brand new ones. It is noticeable that these only have 2 pins that have been used, and these ones do have 6 pins available, but it's not too hard. You just use the correct 2. I think actually you can use 2. There is 2 pairs you could use, or one pair you can use on each side. You just got to check with a multimeter which one it is. From memory there's like a normally open and a normally closed contact, so obviously you have to pick the correct one. Usually for a computer case power switch you want the normally open contact, but yeah, these ones are obviously been made to only have the appropriate one, but the ones you buy have all of them, so you have to figure out the pin out, but it's not too hard. Yeah, so pretty simple to do this. If you do have an issue like this yourself, if the button's broken or it's gotten wet or damp or something, as this is been stored in a damp environment, I think, and the buttons just ended up going rusty. Yeah, you can either replace them like this, cut the old ones off and solder new ones on, or you could just buy a whole new switch assembly. You can buy, pre-wired switches from eBay, Aliexpress, whatever, and just put it in. I'm specifically replacing them on this one though because these wires are very long. The case is quite a large case, so I don't know how easy it would be to get the really long wires. I think the ones you buy are normally typically shorter than this, and I already have the switches anyway, so it makes more sense just to do that. It would just cost extra money to buy a whole new thing, and obviously the wires are fine, it's just the switches that are bad. The plugs here look fairly okay, or at least okay enough. They're not going to be a big deal, but the switches are definitely bad, so yeah, we need to do that. If you needed to, you could always buy new contacts for these and replace them and take them and put them in the housing. These just slide out of the housing. You just have to lift up the little plastic tab and pull them out, and then you could cut those off, recrimp new ones and push them back in. That's always possible too, but this one's just the switches today. I also recommend, if you're doing this, you take something like this here, one of these helping hands things where you can clamp stuff in it, so you can have the switch held in one part and the wires held in the other. Helps you line everything up and get everything much easier than trying to fiddle around soldering, holding the switch and the wire and solder it on at the same time. So definitely recommended to get one of these, or something like it. Obviously, to start with, I shall remove the old switch, which I can't use anymore anyway because one of the pins is broken off. So we're just going to cut this back here. I'm going to cut off a little bit of the wire just in case the wire has corroded a little bit. I'll do the same with this one. Now the polarity of this doesn't matter whatsoever, so you don't have to worry about that. These switches are just switches. Obviously if you're doing, power LED or hard drive activity LED, then you need to pay attention to make sure the polarity makes sense. But other than that, it's totally fine. So now I can strip these back. You don't need to strip a huge amount. That looks pretty fine, nice clean copper, so that won't be an issue. So yeah, the wires are fine, it was just the switches that were corroded. Obviously, you do need to put heat shrink on these as well. As you can see with the original switches, they have heat shrink over the pins and over the wire connection. I suppose in a lot of PC cases that wouldn't technically matter too much, but it's good practice not to have bare things hanging around. Oh, I see. I trolled myself and set my wire strippers to the wrong setting. Now it works perfectly when you actually set it to the right thing. Oh dear, it's one of those days, is it? Probably. Okay. Anyway, there we go. 2 wires stripped back. Excellent. Now I need to go and find some heat shrink to put over those. Like I said, having a bunch of exposed connections is not great, and especially not on this case, because the buttons in this case have a little front panel like I/O board thing with USB ports and stuff on it that's just bare PCB that basically sits directly over them, and that might actually short out if the pins on these were exposed. So I might actually need to cut off the unused pins as well, or bend them over or something when I do this, because it's entirely possible that that there could be an issue if I don't. And you could heat shrink all of them, but it's a bit of a, well, maybe, yeah, I don't know. You could risk damaging the switch by heating it up too much. Right, so I want to just test the continuity here. Let's see. Can we get this here so that it works? Can you see that? Yep, okay. So, like I said, these are momentary buttons. Typically you have momentary ones. You can also get latching ones of these too in the same style, so don't get confused and buy latching ones. And also, these do come in different sizes. That's another thing to note for. This one is a 8x8mm sort of square. The body is 8mm wide, 8mm long, and also about 8mm high, not including the actuator or the pins. But you can get different sizes, like I think 7mm, maybe even 6 or 5mm size body. I think most cases I've seen they use the 8mm ones, but yeah, there's a few different sizes available. So make sure you do get the size you need, and make sure it's probably not the latching type, because most cases you wouldn't want a latching button unless it was for some extra function or something. Now I think from memory, if you look at these here, these have a little square hole there. You see where it says 34 and there's a little hole above it? If I remember correctly, the 2 pins outside that hole, like to the left and right of that hole, not the 2 at the bottom in the picture that aren't next to that, I believe those 2, this pair and that pair, are the normally open contacts, and possibly the 2 down here are the normally closed contacts. Now, this is from memory doing this a while ago, so I'll just have to test that again to make sure. And of course this may change depending on who manufactured your switch, so always a good idea to check that first before you solder it all together. I'm just going to put that in there to make it easier to probe. So I think these ones will, yeah. So the bottom contacts have continuity, and I think the side ones will too. And I don't know if they have continuity to each other. they don't, no. So they're sort of two separate contacts, two separate switches in one. But yeah, those are closed and these are open. So if I was to push down on this, it's a bit fiddly to do that, but if I push down on the button and then probe the two at the top, now we get continuity, and if I probe the one at the bottom, now I don't. So yeah, those are normally open at the bottom and normally closed at the bottom and normally open at the top where that little square bit is. So yeah, just got to check all that, make sure you got the right pins, and so I can use either these two pins here at the top there, or I could use the two over here. It doesn't matter which pair I use, because there's basically two identical switches inside the one switch, but they're separate. Anyway, so yeah, I could just use like those top two right pins and then just cut all the rest off. That's probably what I'll do. I don't know what the numbers mean. This one says 34, this one says 62. Yeah, I don't know. Batch number, no idea. But yeah, I got to find my heat shrink and then I can solder these on. Okay, I've returned with heat shrink. I've moistened my sponge and now we shall proceed. I think the first thing to do would be to tin these wires and tin the contacts on the switch. They are already quite shiny, but I think adding some fresh solder would help. Yeah, I've noticed some of these in the past are just a bit tricky to do, so anyway. But yeah, we just put this up in here. There's the easy part. I've already twisted the strands together. And then I can just tin those. It usually helps to do it that way. In general. Not too much, you don't want a big blob. But it's also easier once you tin the wires to get the heat shrink over them. Which is half my reason for doing that. But also makes it easier to solder afterwards. Now I'm going to trim these a little bit because they are slightly too long, I think. Yep. Just want to take that down a little bit. These ones are definitely too long. So I need to trim those as well. But it's easier to trim stuff once it's tinned because then you don't have a bunch of little copper strands that will fly everywhere and end up in your feet or something. End up stuck in your feet. You can just clip it off, and since you've tinned it all together, it just stays as one bit. Which means it sticks in your feet easier. Well, no, it means that if it does, it's easy to get out. Anyway, but you should really be tidying all your detritus up as you go, so it doesn't end up on the floor. Anyway, let's see. So now that I have determined which of these contacts I need to use, now I think what I'll do is I'll just copy their one because they've done it in a way. Yeah, I mean they've got the little hole there. They've used the top two left ones for theirs, so I may do the same thing. In fact, that'll be easier to arrange in this whole thing anyway. You know, it's quite funny. I previously made a video where I replaced some buttons in a case, and I think the whole video was out of focus. Maybe this one will be out of focus as well. Wouldn't that be ironic? Whoops. That didn't go on very well, did it? Let's try that again. Now we've got a big blob on that one, but that's okay. You can employ the method of heat it up and flick it off, or hit it on the table. So I just heat the blob up and then go like that, and it comes off, mostly comes off. Anyway, we can touch that up on the side. But yes. I don't know what material these pins are made of. They might be sort of aluminium or something. Although that's a bit strange because the other ones were rusted, but I don't know. Steel. Something like tinned steel or something. They're a bit funny to solder onto, so tin them first as just makes everything easier. And now I clamp that in there, remembering of course to cut some heat shrink off. That should be enough. So we can, I'll just unravel this a little bit. You can twist these back together once you're done, but I'll slide the heat shrink on. You just want to keep it away from the joint so it doesn't get shrunk down by the iron, and then you can't use it. But yeah, then you can sort of, clamp everything and align it in the thing. So that's the fun part, and that's why these are quite useful. But yeah, if I just get that in here, something like that, and then I can bring this in, just lie that right onto there, just get it all basically directly in line so that the wire and the pin are lying right next to each other. And as long as that yeah, sometimes it can be a bit fiddly, but this is what I mean. It's much easier if you have the thing stuck. I wish I had a manual focus on this camera. I think there is an option to do it in the software, but when I try to do it, it just freezes everything up. So unfortunately I can't do it, but maybe you can see there. Or maybe you can't. Maybe it's the curse of the out of focus power switch videos. Anyway, my point is, you get the two pits aligned and you stick them really close to each other. And you get it to a point where they're right side by side. And then you can solder it on, hopefully. And because they're all already tinned, everything just goes together magically. Or at least it should. But yes, there we go. So you can see that that has been done fairly well. We've got a thing on there that works pretty good. And then I just have to do that for all the rest of them, which I won't bother showing because I've already shown it. You don't need to see 3 more exactly the same, but that's basically the process. Alright, so I have finished the other 3 wires, and now I have 2 brand new switches soldered and heat shrunk and everything onto these cables. Yeah, so that should be good. All I have to do now is basically put them back in the case. Oh yeah, and cut the extra pins off, I suppose, or at least bend them out of the way. I think I might cut the, let me see, I might cut like this one here off. Because that's the normally closed pin that we don't need anyway. So if I cut that off and then I just bend the others over, that should be the easiest way to do that. Deal with that issue. There we go. Let's just bend those over there, cut the other one off, and that means that I still have another pair of contacts left. If I ever wanted to use the switch, if these broke off or something and I needed to use these ones, I could always rewire it to that and not have to waste another switch, potentially. So that's a thing too you can do if you want. But yeah, it probably doesn't matter either way. I mean, these switches are very cheap. You can get packs of 20, 50, 100 for, a few dollars, so it's not a big deal in terms of price. But there we go, those are ready to go back in the case. I suppose I should test them 100% to make sure they work before I do that, otherwise that would be annoying. Murphy's Law, of course, if I don't test them, something will be wrong. That's just how it goes. So let me just get that in the way. There you go, you can see that. And if I probe onto the contacts on the other end of the wire here, this of course checks to make sure the wiring is all good. Whoops. My probes are just falling on the floor, but that's okay. Let me get that in that hand, and if I reach around here and press the switch, yep, it works, just as you'd expect. And let's test the other one, make sure that's good as well. Just hold the probe on there, and we got the blue one, the reset switch. See, that one's a bit funny. Don't know if that's the contacts in the... I don't know if that's the contacts on this end or the switch. The contacts look okay. And that is why we test things before we put them back in the machine. Let me try that again. I mean, yeah, we've got... That's odd. It's got continuity, but it's not perfect. Good point. Seems to be an issue with the switch itself, possibly. Maybe the wire? No, if I hold it. Strange. Very strange. I don't know. It's probably alright. I mean, for a reset switch, it's probably good enough, honestly. Not going to bother trying to figure that out unless it stops working. Or something like that. I don't know. It just seems to be slightly high resistance, but these contacts look okay. Like those aren't dirty or anything, but you never know. There could be something funny going on. Anyway, I think it's good enough. The power switch obviously seems to be fine, and reset, well, you hardly ever use that anyway. I imagine it should be good enough. Yeah. Who knows? That is strange though. What's that? 82. Yeah, that's the switch I didn't test before I soldered it. I did test this one with a 34 on it, and it was fine. Maybe the switch just has a crappy contact inside. Who knows? You never know. There you go. Always verify stuff before you test it out. But I think it's good enough. Good enough for me anyway. Of course, I say that it'll probably come back and bite me later on, and I'm like, why won't this computer restart? Why doesn't the reset button work? Oh, that's right, it was that one that I didn't do properly. But I mean, even when it's not fully down, it's still only like 0.2 of a volt, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. I think it's good enough, probably. Yeah, I'll believe that. Anyway, but as you can see, that's how you can do it. Obviously, test things maybe before you do them, as opposed to what I just did, but I think it'll be fine. And again, I'm only using this for myself, so I don't care too much about it. If I was doing this for someone else, I would look into that more, maybe do it again, but honestly, I don't think it's a big deal. Hopefully that'll help you figure out how to replace any worn out or corroded or broken power switches on your case, if the need arises. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes they wear out. Sometimes they fail in some way. And yeah, just make sure you get the right size. I've only ever seen the 8mm ones used in most cases, but Who knows, there's probably some obscure strange case somewhere that uses like a 7mm or even a 5mm one, just for the hell of it. So yeah, just something to look out for. Measure your switches first before you buy new ones. They may not be 8mm, although that seems to be the standard. Anyway, hopefully that was interesting, hopefully that was useful, and I'll see you next time.